The Sikha that we're learning today is in, look at the Sikhas Chelik of Ches, the first Sikha to Parshas Pinchas. The Rebbe talks about the mitzvah of Nachlois, the mitzvah of the Bezdin, making sure that the inheritance is done the right way. And the Psukim go into the dinim of inheritance. If you don't have a son, it goes to the daughter. It's at all the other dinim concerning inheritances. Now we know that in the beginning of the Sefer Hayad, the Yad HaChazokah, the Sefer of the Rambam has a list of all the mitzvahs. First, he has a list of all the positive mitzvahs, mitzvah sesa. Then he has a list of all the mitzvahs, leisa, all the negative mitzvahs. That's like an introduction to what he's going to write in the whole Sefer. So the Rebbe says here, in Minyan HaMitzvahs, Bereish Sefer Hayad, in the Minyan, the list of mitzvahs, that's in the beginning of the Sefer Hayad of the Rambam Sefer, Valderach says, I Sefer HaMitzvah, the same way is, there's a whole Sefer called Sefer HaMitzvahs, which the Rambam al-Chatchila wrote it as an introduction to the Rambam, but it turned into a mitzvah, into a Sefer for itself. So the same thing there too. Schreib the Rambam, there the Rambam writes, als die letzte mitzvah sese. When he gives a list of mitzvahs, the last one of the mitzvah sese, the section of the positive mitzvahs, is this, he writes, Lodun bedin achlas, that Bezdin has to judge the dinim of inheritance. Shanemar, as it says, Ish ki yomus v'bein einlei. If a man will die, doesn't have a son. If you look in the Parsha, when the Parsha talks about Nachlas, the Psukim start, the Eibusher spoke to Moshe, and he said like this, if a man will die, won't have a son, and the Torah continues, give it Nachla to his daughter. There's no daughter, give it to the next of kin, and the Pasuk goes into who you give it to. So the Rambam, when he wants to quote that the Torah has a mitzvah essa of Nachlas, the Rambam quotes the Pasuk, as it says, Ish ki yomus, if a man dies, ubein einlei, and doesn't have a son, and that's all the Rambam brings, and this refers to all the psukim that continue with the mitzvah of Nachlas, how the Bezdin is supposed to divide the Yerusha. So the Rebbe says here, so Yedua, as the Seder in Rambam is Medui B'Tachlis. We know that the Seder, the order in Rambam, is also very, very exact. Like it says in Yad Malachi, etc., etc. But Apisa is moving. Also, the Rambam is medayek to Messiah and mitzvahs esse with the mitzvah for Nachlas. So from that we understand that the fact that the Rambam made sure to finish off the mitzvahs, meaning which section of the mitzvahs, the mitzvah esse, the positive mitzvahs, with the mitzvah of inheritance, must be is while the mitzvah is the Gemara Shleimus for Minyan mitzvah. Must be because this mitzvah is the end and the completion of all the mitzvahs. Now, in the order 3, the Rebbe says, B'chlal, we don't know exactly what is the Seder that the Rambam took when he lists all the mitzvahs. But the Rebbe says, but for sure, that anybody, not even a special person, any person, when he makes a list, maybe there is no special order that he puts it, but the first and the last will be with a special order. Everybody will have in mind why you start with that and why you finish with that. So here, when the Rambam finishes off, the Rambam, anyway, special, he has his special orders and everything. But this is something that's obvious, that the last mitzvah must be for a certain reason, that this is the completion of all the mitzvahs, the end of all the mitzvahs. And concerning the end, the Rebbe brings in order 3, the Gemara says in Brochas, everything follows the end. So whatever the end is, for sure, that contains the nekuda of everything before it. So here, it must be that Nachlas, the union of inheritance, is the nekuda of all the mitzvahs. Okay, the mitzvah, the shein yamin the mitzvahs. Leida sheishem alakah, shenemar necha Hashem alakech. And just like the first mitzvah in that list of mitzvahs, which is, as the Rambam writes, to know that there is a God. Like it says, Anochi Hashem alakech, Hashem said, I am your God, is the tam erfun moving bepashtas. The reason is obvious. This is the first and the most important mitzvahs of all the mitzvahs that come after that. Like the Rambam writes in the beginning of his Sefer, these are the words. The foundation of all foundations. The pillar of all wisdom is Leida, to know that there is an Eibishter. There is a Metzias, first Metzias, which is the Eibishter. So that's the first thing. And with the Rambam is medayek bereish minyan mitzvahs, like the Rambam writes, B'diuk, in the beginning of the list of the mitzvahs, he says, mitzvah rishayna. The first mitzvah, he refers to it as the first mitzvah. And in the order 5 that Rebbe brings from other places that he uses medayek, how come the Rambam uses the Lashon, the first mitzvah? He doesn't write by the third mitzvah, the fourth mitzvah, etc. Because he wants to tell us that this is the first. So it makes sense that the first mitzvah that you write is the very most important mitzvah. Al derech zeh is movement negate the letzten mitzvah. So from that, the same way we understand also Concerning the last mitzvah, it says the mitzvah of nachlis, the mitzvah of inheritance, as he kum bediuk als mitzvah achreina, the mitzvah says, it comes exact as the last mitzvah of the list of the positive mitzvahs. The farvazi is their sim ukmar for all the mitzvahs, because that's the end, the finish, the completion of all the mitzvahs. So that's one thing. So we have, basically, the Rebbe didn't use the words to have to understand, but the question is, why is the mitzvah of inheritance an inyan that represents all the mitzvahs? That's in the kud of all the mitzvahs. Then the Rebbe says like this: Bashkofer Hashem, what we can say, there's a tam derfun, bepashtes. At first glance, you could say the reason is very simple. Since the fulfillment of all the mitzvahs of the Torah is done when a person is alive, but the mitzvah of inheritance is connected to something that happens after the person's life. The person passes away. That's what the Rambam writes at the end of the finish of all the mitzvahs, because mitzvahs are given when you're alive, and this is something that happens after the person's life, so it belongs at the end. The Rebbe says so. The Rebbe says understood that this is not simple. Because there are many mitzvahs written in the Rambam before, not as the end, which are connected to the death of a person. And certain things are connected even to things you have to do after a person dies. So obviously that's not the reason, because there are many mitzvahs that are connected to a person gabe after his life. Besides that, the Rebbe says, the mitzvah of inheritance is not a mitzvah that's put on the person himself, what we or anything like it. That means we said it because this comes after the person dies. The mitzvah is not on the person. The mitzvah of bezdin loden bedin nachlas. The mitzvah on bezdin, the courts have to judge. That's the mitzvah, to judge in the din nachlas. As the Rebbe brings, that the Chinuch writes, it seems from the Rambam, Shekol Iker Azhoro or Azaros Einer Akal Bezin. The whole mitzvah of Nachlas is on the court of the community. Shedon Binyan Nachla. That they have to judge. And he quotes the Lashon Rambam, mitzvah lodun bedin nachla. The way the Rambam writes in the mitzvah of Nachlas, he uses the word, like we said before, lodun. Bezin has to judge the dinim. So it's a din, not on the person who passed away. Und mit der Rambam ist im Weibe Protis im Seder Anachlis in der Halacha Sefer Yad Gufe. Like the Rambam writes all the Protidin, the details of the Halacha of Nachlis, what Bezdin has to do behind it. What does that mean? As Bezdin soll down sein, wie es soll sein, the Seder Yerushas Anachlis for the Lebedike Yorshim. That this is a din that Bezdin has to judge. The courts have to judge. What is the order of inheritance for the people who are heirs, for the people who are alive? It's not to make sure that the one that died, his nachla, his property should be given properly. It's a din on the bezdin to see that the living who are heirs, what they should get. So you can't connect it to say the reason why this is the last one, because he died already. It's not a mitzvah on him, it's a mitzvah on bezdin, that after he died, what bezdin should do. So we can't give this answer why nachlas is the end of all the mitzvahs. So we're back to the question, why is nachla the end? It definitely means that the nachla, the inyan of inheritance, has a connection to the etzem of the mitzvah, the nekud of mitzvahs, but what is it? The Rebbe says, we also have to understand, if the mitzvah are now loten bedin nachlas, and this mitzvah, where the Rambam writes that the mitzvah is that you have to judge, Bezdin has to judge the dinim of the inheritance, bring the Rambam the posik, and I'll bring the Rambam brings which posik, as we mentioned before, Shanamar, the Rambam says, it says, Ish kiyomus ubein. If a person dies and doesn't have a son, was l'chura liegt nicht in die Werte der Teichna mitzvah. L'chura, in these words, if a person dies and has no son, that doesn't contain the meaning of the Teichna of the mitzvah of nachlas. There are other versions in the Rambam, like welche the Rambam is take meitig noch werte from posik. Where according to those versions, the Rambam take quotes more words of the posik, like the words vavarte mestachlosa, you have to give over the inheritance, etc., to a daughter. According to some versions, he even finishes off with the posik where it says that these laws of nachla should be for a chukas mishpat, should be for a law. For the but these words and actually contain what the meaning of the mitzvah of nachlas is. Bald aber hat in Fuß Rambam und the Fuß werden gebracht, nur die Werte ich gejomus bein Leib. But since in the accepted, spread out, known prince of the Rambam only quotes the words of these words from the Posik, Ish Kiyomus. If a person dies, doesn't have a son, that's all he quotes as a Posik that refers to the mitzvah of Nachlas. We have to say, as in Zei Zok sich Arui Zeteichen mitzvah Lodn Bedin Nachlas. So we have to say that in these words expresses what the mitzvah of Nachlas is. When the Rambam says you have to judge the inheritance, and that's the last mitzvah, that is hinted in these words. If a person dies and doesn't have a son. The Parsha Sheshlemer, simply you could say, Amit bringen die erste Werte von der Parsha, meint der Rambam dem ganzen Hemshech Advarim Sheva Parsha. Maybe with the Rambam, when he quotes the first words of this section of the Parsha, he doesn't mean just these words. It's the beginning. He means the whole Parsha. Like we find in many mitzvahs, where the Rambam says this and this is the mitzvah, and he quotes a posik, and he quotes just the beginning of that section of the psukim, and he means the beginning, and he means the rest of the psukim. The Baldobar, so maybe you could say the same thing here. Rambam doesn't mean dafka these words. He quotes the first words of this section, and he means the rest. But the Rebbe adds, since everything in Torah is very exact, is mistaber leim, it makes sense to say, especially the Rambam doesn't even say etc. If the Rambam would at least say these words, the gamer means etc. So you could say he's starting off and go look further. The Rambam doesn't even do that. The Rambam just writes these words. So we must say, as in die Werte allein that in these words themselves, we see the main concept of what the mitzvah of Nachla is, or the union of inheritance is. That's what the Rebbe is going to explain. The Ashleimer, the Rebbe said, we could say like this. Adosa the Rambam is Messiah, the million of mitzvahs, mit Loten Medina Nachla. This that we see that the Rambam finishes off the list of mitzvahs, a mitzvah concerning the din of Nachlas, is al derech when we gefind as the siyum from Shisa Sidre Mishnah, we find something similar in the end of Mishnayos. We know we have 6 Sidorim in Mishnayos. The end of Mishnayos, Mesichta Uktzin, finishes off with these words, mit Maimer, with the statement of the Chazal, that in the future Hashem is going to make inherit. See, we see right away, finishes off with Eibishter will make every tzaddik inherit, and it goes on 310 worlds, etc., etc. Shnemer, like it says, lahanchil eihavayesh, that Eibishter will make inherit those that love Hashem. Yesh, and yesh as Yud is 310. So that's the end of Mishnayos. And before Shem explain what's the reason why Mishnayos finishes with this statement of the Chazal, that this is talking about the reward that a tzaddik, a yid, gets when he finishes his avodah of Torah mitzvah. What comes after that? The reward comes after you're finished and you're complete in learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. When the Mishnah is medayik, so what does it say after at the end? And the Mishnah says, Osi HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahanchil, the Eibishter is going to make them inherit. That's the reward that comes after Torah mitzvahs. While the Gemul was kum marabei the Torah mitzvahs is the lahanchil, because the payment, which means the reward that the Yid gets for finishing doing the avodah of Torah mitzvah he's supposed to, is the concept of inheriting. So since we see in Mishnayos that it finishes off at the end of Mishnah, which is after the whole Torah, because Mishnayos is the whole Torah, after the whole Torah, with the concept of inheritance, the Shleimer as al derech zeh, but didn't dan, you can say same thing from Rambam. Is Messiah with the mitzvah von Nachlas, he finishes off with the mitzvah of inheritance, while the Siyum Shleimus von alle mitzvahs Torah is verbunden mit Inyan Nachla Kanal, because the completion and the reward, so to speak, of the whole Torah, what is the Nakuda of the whole Torah is connected to the union of Nachla. We don't know yet how, but the Rebbe will explain it, but that's what we see. Now, just to go through a few ha'oras, when the Rebbe said that the Rambam does it similar to the Mishnah, so in order 19, the Rebbe says, we find in many things that the Rambam copied the Seder in his Sefer to the Seder the way it's a Mishnayos. But this is also like Mishnayos. Then in the order 23, the Rebbe says, we're saying that the last maimer, the last statement in Mishnayos is this one, that Eibush is going to make every tzaddik inherit whatever it says, etc. It's not so. You look in the Mishnah, is the end is a different statement. The statement of the Shimon Mechalafte, where he says, that the Eibishter did not find any vessel that could hold brocha for Yidden, only Sholem. That comes at the end. So l'chura, what we just said at the end is concerning lahanchil, the inheritance is not really the end. So the Rebbe says, if you look up and look at the Sichas and other places, the Rebbe explains, he explains how this is really a continuation of the one before. Really, the end is with the one that the Eibishter is going to make Yidden inherit. As a continuation, as the Rebbe explains in the other places, he finishes off with the union of Sholem. But really, the end is with this union, the union of Nachla. And the same thing with the Rambam, that the end is in the union of Nachla. So you can give now the explanation, everything we said before. By first bringing in this Nakuda that the Rebbe is going to say now. Parshas Nachla steht in der Teira als Hemshach zum Minyan Yerusha v'Achluke von Eretz Yisrael. The Parsha of Nachla, the whole section of Nachla, of inheritance in the Teira, comes in continuation to the inheritance and the division of Eretz Yisrael. In connection to inheriting Eretz Yisrael, the daughter of Tzlofchot claimed, give us a share because our father didn't have any sons, so we want to take the share. And that, as an answer to that, came the Parsha of Nachlas. That David said that if someone dies and he doesn't have a son, give it to the daughter, etc., etc. So it comes out that the union of Parshas Nachlas is connected to the inheritance of Eretz Yisrael. So now let's analyze what happened by the division, by the giving the inheritance of Eretz Yisrael, and from that we'll understand what the union of Nachla is, because the Parsha of Nachlas is a continuation of the way Eden inherited Eretz Yisrael, and from that we'll go to answer all the questions. So we find by the union of dividing, of giving Eretz Yisrael, as Neisev of the Klolos Dikezach for Yerusha Soros, besides the fact that generally we refer to it as the Yerusha. Getting Eretz Yisrael is an inheritance. That's clearly, like in Orah 25, the Rebbe says, because there's a posting in Parsha Ve'era, when the Sati Eiso Lachem Meirosha, Eibush is saying, I'll give the land to you as an inheritance. Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, Yerushi Lachem Avisechem. This is an inheritance. So generally we refer to Yidden getting Eretz Yisrael, they inherited Eretz Yisrael. But if you look into the details, there were three aspects in this Yidden getting Eretz Yisrael. One is Yerusha Soros. One is they got it as an inheritance, referred to as inheritance. The second thing is based the Chaluka Beim from Laraf Tarba Nachlos Lamat Tarba Nachlos. It was given in such a way that the one that had more people in his tribe got a bigger share. The one that got less got a smaller share. Now that is not inheritance. That's something that you divide with Seichel. Inheritance is not Seichel. Inheritance is something that just goes over. And if you have and many children as you have, makes no difference. Each child could have a whole different amount of children. Everyone inherits equally. Here, the fact that we gave in different ways shows already it's not a regular inheritance. It has also the aspect of using seichel, how to divide it. And Gimel, the third thing is, the division of the land was done through throwing lots, making a gedel. Das heißt, that means, the Shaychus of Eretz Yisrael to Yidden is beprotis and Reifanim. The connection of Eretz Yisrael to Yidden is in detail. It has 3 points to it. Number one, Yerusha, it's an inheritance. Number two, Chaluki al Pitam V'Seichel, L'Rav Tarba Gamer. It's divided according to logic. That's why it said L'Rav Tarba, that if you have more people, you get more, etc., etc. And the third thing is Chaluki al Pigedel. It was divided by a gedel, by throwing lots. And lots, as we'll see, lots is something that completely beyond Seichel. Now, in Orah 29, the Rebbe does ask the question, but there was another thing, and that's the Urim V'Tumim. They asked the Urim V'Tumim, they can't go to the war. By the Chesh in the war Durim V'Tumim, and Durim V'Tumim, they would be able to ask questions, and it would light up to give answers. So the Durim V'Tumim lit up to when the Gedel came out, the Durim V'Tumim lit up that this is true, that this Shevet should get this Shevet should get this. So L'chura seems to hear that there's a fourth inyan. So the Rebbe says the Durim V'Tumim is inyan echad im Gedel. It's one thing with the Gedel. It's not a new inyan. That proved that the Gedel was with Ruach HaKodesh. But be'emes, it's all part of the Gedel. So we have three things here. There's the Yerusha Yisrael was given as an inheritance, given with Seichel, division of the Seichel, and also of the Gedel. Yashleimer hatam lozef. Avos es fodder zum v'darayon. The Rebbe will explain the reason. Why do we need these three things? So it says like this. Those was Yidden am Bakum and Eretz Yisrael lots nachlo. This that Yidden got Eretz Yisrael as an inheritance, that he got it, is given nichts tam übergeben, zu teilen a Land zu Yidden. It wasn't Stam, the Eibusha gave the Yidden the land. They divided the land, gave it over to the Eden. That's not the reason. Eretz Yisrael is the Nachals Hashem. Eretz Yisrael is considered the inheritance of Hashem. It's a posik in Shmuel, the Rebbe quotes. As the posik says in Chumash, Tomid Eini Hashem Elokecha Bo Mereish Hashanah V'Achar Hashanah. It's a land that the eyes of Hashem are there constantly from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. That's what Eretz Yisrael is. Eretz Yisrael is connected to Hashem. The fire is Nisinoso to Eden Dafke Behesse mit dem was Eden seine Nachas Hashem. Why did Eden get? Because Yisrael is called the Nachlo of Hashem, the inheritance of Hashem. Eden are also the Nachlo of Hashem, verbunden mit Nebishten. Eden are connected to the Nebishter. So giving Eretz Yisrael to the Eden is because the Eden are connected to the Nebishter. My Mechazal, like the Chacham tell us, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hashem said, Yovei Yisrael Shabo Lechelki, let the Eden come, who came to my share, the Yinchelo as Ha'oretz Shabo Lechelki, and they should inherit the land that came to my share. So it comes out that the Eden getting Eretz Yisrael is not just the Eden got a land. It's connected to the connection of the Eden to the Nebishter. The Nebishter gave Eden Eretz Yisrael because the Eden are connected to the Nebishter. That's why they got the Yisrael. But Meile is the Sinne von Eretz Yisrael Nachas Hashem zu Eden. Megale und is ein Ausdruck von Edens verbunden mit Nebishter. So since the Eden got Eretz Yisrael, because the Eden are connected to the Nebishter, the Meile, the getting of Eretz Yisrael reveals the connection of Eden to the Nebishter. So what the Rebbe is going to try to say that why are there three things in Eden getting Eretz Yisrael? These three aspects, because there are three aspects in the connection of Eden to the Nebishter. Because getting Eretz Yisrael is not something just getting a land. It's an expression of the Nebishter's connection, the Eden's connection, the Nebishter to the Eden to the Nebishter. So when we analyze what's the connection of Eden to the Nebishter, we'll see why Eretz Yisrael was given in these three ways, because there are three ways in the connection of the Eden to the Nebishter. Therefore, just like we find that the connection of Eden to Hashem is in three ways, as we say in the beginning of davening before Tfilas HaShachar. What do we say? Ashreinu matev chalkeinu, lucky is our share, chalkeinu. Umanoyim geraleinu, and how geschmack, how beautiful, not beautiful, how tasty, so to speak, how sweet is our geirel, our lot. Umayofa Yerushaseinu, how nice, how beautiful is our inheritance. So we have three things here, and this is where we in davening express our connection to the Eibishter. Our connection to the Eibishter is because it's Chalkeinu, it's our part, our share. He's our Geirel, it's our Geirel to him, and we are his Yerusha Seinu, whatever, however we will explain it. Al derech zeh in the Sinne von Eretz Yisrael to Eden in the Drei Yefanim. So therefore, when the Eden got Eretz Yisrael, had to be the same three ways, because as we said, it's an expression of the Yid's connection to the Eibishter, so Eretz Yisrael has the same three ways. And what are the three ways, as we said before? Chelik, they got their share, which is a share means given to you with logic, why you get the share. Geirel, it came also with lots, the Yerusha, and also came as an inheritance. What does that mean? So first the Rebbe says, which one is the deeper one? Before we get into analyze what they are. The Baal is in them Seder from the Drei Yonim Chelik Geirel Yerusha. Is the letzter Mayofa Yerusha Seinu. And since when we talk about the three things we say in davening, that we're a Chelik and we're Geirel and Yerusha, the last one is Yerusha, and usually we go Ilui Achar Ilui, we go higher and higher. So obviously, the full movement we understand as Yerusha hot nizir the atifere ninja no maila with the Friedrich space. So Yerusha inheritance has a deeper maila, something more than the other two. And so Tzarech Bir, we have to understand what is der Bir v'chiluk zwischen Chelik Geirel Yerusha als Sefanim in the Verbund zwischen Eden mit Nebish. Number one, what is the difference between Chelik and Geirel and Yerusha, Legabe, the connection of Yidden to the Eibush? It's not just plain, we use a lot of words. Each one has a meaning. And Yerusha is the deepest thing. What is that? And the second thing, Vi pas bechal de Gedar Yerusha. Yerusha means when someone dies, like the Posik says, someone dies, Ish Kiyomos, there's inheritance. We're talking about a connection from Yidden to the Eibush. What's the need of Misa there? How does it fit to you? There's no the concept of death, and that's why we're connected. So what does it got to do with the sinyan of Ish Kiyomus? And then obey namely that this is the union of Yerusha, and it's the Yerusha that's the connection with Eden and Davish, the form of Yerusha. How does that fit? Yeshleima the Rebbe says the pshat like this: the chilik zwischen Chalkeinu and Geireleinu. Let's start like this. The difference between our chilik, our share, and our Geirel. Like we said before, there's Chalkeinu, Geireleinu, and Yerusha Seinu. So first, let's analyze the first two. Chalkeinu and Geireleinu. The difference between the two is bedugmas and chilik from mecher and matana. It's like similar to selling and giving a present. Mecher is totally in the kesef v'tashav alakeach. When you sell something, it depends on the payment of the buyer. So the buyer, it's because of the buyer gives you money. That's how you give it to him. But it's sold for him dover animker. He pays for the thing that was sold. Matone kommt zu dem Retzene Ate von dem nächsten Matone. Und Tashlum ist dem Makabel. The present is that the guy doesn't pay. The receiver doesn't pay for it. It comes just because the goodwill of the giver. He wanted to give him a present. That's called a present. If he pays for it, it's not a present. So a present means it comes from the giver. So too, when we have all these things that come from the Eibishter, all the Hamshochas that come from the Eibishter, all the Hashpos, the things that the Eibishter gives to Yidden, as I find them, the Tzvei find we have these two things. But the Eibishter gives us everything, and B'meila, that's our connection to him. There are these two ways. One way is Chara Mitzvahs, V'chulu. The Eibishter gives us a reward for the mitzvahs we do. In other words, we do something, we deserve the reward. It's Amshocha that comes from the Eibishter based on what we do. That's called in Chassidus Isarusa de Latate. There are two things. There is Isarusa de Leila, Isarusa de Latate. Isarusa de Latate means, it's a lotion from Zayar. Isarusa means an awakening from below. The one that's below, the receiver did something and he gets. Isarusa de Leila means something that comes from above, from the Eibishter. So the first thing is we get a schar for our mitzvahs. So that's the connection we have. We get Amshochas as a result of what we did. So we, so to speak, almost like pay for it. We pay and we get like selling, like a buyer. Then you have a second hamshocha, but tuvei b'chein. Sometimes we say the Eibishter hamshocha, but tuvei b'chein v'ches the Eibishter give because he wants to give. That is his arusa le'eila mitzalatzim. That's a say that the Eibishter gives us. So there's two connections from things that come from us. We are the receiving end, and the receiver is deserving. The other one is not deserving. The Eibishter gives it. Generally, this is the difference between saying that Ashreinu Matev Chelkeinu, our chelik, and our gero, our lot. Chelkeinu is the Verbund von Niden mit Nebischen, was tut sich auf durch der Aveide von Niden. Chelkeinu means our share. Why do we get a certain share? Normally, you buy it. It's like selling. So you buy it. Buy it means you paid for it. So our connection to Nebischen comes because we did something. We did Aveide, like somebody who sold us something, and we bought it, we paid for it, so we pay. That's the first connection, like we said before, which is only it comes in Sarusa de Latate. Geroleinu lat is the iskashas v'nit mit nebish mitzadem as bochar bono kolamim. The lot, when we throw lots, when we throw a gerel, that's that shows on the connection which is beyond us. It comes because the Eibush that chose us. That's what the gerel is. What's the Eibush that chose us? So the real meaning of choosing, and we use the real meaning of choosing. Bchira chofsh means free choice. Free choice means even the dover when whatever you choose is not because of any calculation that you make. Because the thing that you chose has something special. It's only because the one that chooses it wants it. An example always given: if you have an apple and an orange, and you like an orange, we won't use the real meaning. You had no choice. You don't like an apple, you like an orange. You had no choice. Whatever you chose the orange. So the orange forced you to choose it. The real choice is when in the chosen one, there's nothing that made the chooser choose. So why did he choose it? Because he decided to choose it. So choosing something is completely come from the side of the one that chooses. In them is as bedugmas habchira al de agel. This bchira, this choice of the Eibishter, is similar when you choose something by throwing a geidel, making a geidel. What try to do? Why do you make a geidel on something? Because it's not apitam sichli, parbun mit mailas adover welchem mevarv geidel. It's not the logical reason. When you throw geidel, there's nothing in the object that the geidel is going to show that makes you take that. If that would be the reason, okay, it's anything like that. If that would be the reason, you wouldn't make a geidel. This is better than that. I see a mile in one over the other. I don't throw a geidel. When do you throw a geidel? When there's nothing different in the two. So I throw a geidel, which one it should be. That means that, so the decision is similar to Bchira, which is, we rely completely on the geidel, not knowing how it's going to, what the result is going to be. The Pasuk says, that you make a geidel, it's made in the pocket, which basically means when you write down on a piece of paper, make a geidel, you put it in your pocket, so you think you're doing it. No, it comes from the Eibishter. It's not something that has nothing to do with you. It comes completely from the Maila. So this is the idea of Geirl, similar to, as we said before, to Pchira of the Eibishter, the connection of Yidden to the Eibishter with the form of Geirl, is to shot something that's there, that the Eibishter from his side chooses. So these are the two inyonim. That's the inyon of Aveda that we do, that we deserve the Eibishter's schar, that's the connection. And there's a higher connection than that inyon of Pchira, which is Geirl. Al derech, which is like a matone. Al derech of matone, which is abhängig nur von der Ratzon Neis, like a present. A present depends only on the will of the giver. It's not dependent on the receiver. It's not that the receiver worked for it. But the Rebbe says, actually, matone is not exactly like pchire. Why? Nor mit them, chile, the difference is, was matone hat eine nekuda hashove zu mech. In one aspect, present has something similar to being sold. For even though, as we said before, a present comes completely because the giver wanted to give it. There is something, there's a reason why you decide to give it that has to do with the receiver. The Gemara says, if a person, if the receiver, this other person, would not have done you a favor, made you feel good, you wouldn't give him that present. So you don't have to give him. So the Rebbe in Order 44 says, it's not payment. It's not like he sell it. Payment, when you sell it, he gives you the money, you have to give him. He forces you to give him because you're selling it to him. What's the end of a present? Taka, what he did makes you feel good. So it makes you turn to him, but it doesn't force you to give it. So in that way, it's not like Mashenkin Geidel hot can shaykes nit zu cheshem betam. Geidel has no connection to tam, and a present does. But nevertheless, there is a similarity between a present and Geidel, that it doesn't really come because you deserve it. That part doesn't come because of the Isarusa de la Tate, what the person who receives does. It comes completely from the person who gives. Now, by Geidel, it's completely, and by Matona, there is some aspect of the Makabel, but in generally, they will go together. So here we see the two inyon. We have the inyon of Mecher and Matona, or as we call it now, Chelik and Geidel. Chelik is when you give somebody his share, what belongs to him, that he deserves it. And Geidel is something that comes completely from the one that's giving you. The Emek Yeser, which Gabe Yidden means that there's a one-way the connection of the Yidden to the Eibishter because they worked for him, they did Torah mitzvahs, and the other way is because the Eibishter decided to connect to them, he chose them. The Emek Yeser, that you go even deeper. The Rinje von Chakein is verbunden nicht nur mit der Avede von Yidden, nur Deichen des Erze Metzias. When we say that the Rinje of Chalkenu means the share, because that's like the sale that you worked for it and you got it, which is not the matone, it's not only connected to the Aveda of the Yidden, it's connected to the fact that the Yidden are Yidden, to the Metzias of Yidden. Which means that the Eibishter wants to give the Yidden and connects to the Yidden because they're Yidden. So on one hand, it's still because of the Yidden. So even though this prat that we're saying and I say now is not the Aveda of the Yidden, but it's still connected to the receiver. What we said before, the difference between the two is one is the receiver, one is the giver. Now the Rebbe is saying that even in the one that the receiver is not only a receiver, why is it considered that it's from his part because he worked for it? Not only that, it's because who he is, but it's still the receiver. The Rebbe explains. Von der Neshama von Yidden wird angerufen Chelik Havai Amen. The word Chelik, we find that the Pasuk says the Yidden, the nation of Hashem, is a share, is a chelik of the Eibishter. Loshen HaTanya, it says in Tanya, Nefesh Hashem is Yisrael, he chelik elekam emal mamash, the second Nefesh, which is Nefesh Elekis, is a chelik of the Eibishter himself. So here we have a nekuda that it's not only the Aveda that you didn't do, it's still connected to the receiving end, because you are who you are. Before we said that Chalkein is because you worked. Geirul comes from the Eibishter completely. Now he's saying you could have in Chalkein also not because you worked, but nevertheless it's still you. Because it's you who you are a chelik the Eibishter gives you. So Rebbe says, even in this, that the Yidden are a chelik of Hashem, so it's not because what they did. Geirul is even more than that. Why? As I just explained, but the Rebbe explains it. Those was mezokta with the neshama from Yidden chelik kal mal mamash. What we say about the neshama of Yidden, it's a chelik of the Eibishter. Triktu is the Maila Gdusha in the Metzias von Yidden that brings out the specialty, the holiness that's there in the Yid. Was Yashlemer, as der Far verbindet Alter Rebbe, die Meile von Chedel Kalmal Mamish, mit dem Masiten wird non-gerufen Bonel Lavake, which could be the reason why David connects the fact that the Neshama is a chelik of Hashem with the idea that Yidden are called children. Bonim Lamakim. Children to Hashem. Bonim Atam Hashem Lekech, like the Pasuk here are children to Hashem. What does that mean? Azevi Aben Kipshute, just like Posha the son. Was ein Kesher zum Av, is ein Inyan, was Basitzich zum Metzias Aben. What's this connection? For the fact that this is his son. So it's connected to the son because he is a son. So as much as we're not, even by children, we don't say it's because the child is connected because he did good things. It's connected just because he's a child. But still, kum tuis as eich der inyan in Chakenu is bedugmet zum inyan hamecher was kum tzedam lekech. Even this part in Chakenu, which we said is not because of the Aved of Yidden, but it's only because of the Metzias, but it's still something that has to do with the lekech, something has to do with the receiver, with the one that gets it. But the second thing, Gerolenu, which is Bocharbon, he chose us, is neither really in their Metzias from the Yidden. It's not because the Yidden have a Meile. In other words, not only is it higher because the first one is the Yidden do Aved, and this is beyond Aved. We're even talking when it's not Aved. Chalkeinu has the higher Madrege that it's because you are a Yid. It's still connected to the Metzias of a Yid. But wie heich es soll sein, is es fort am Meile Kedusha Magvel. As great as it is, this idea that you're a Yid, it's still a specific, limited holiness, Milat Meile. The Baldas is the Kedusha welches verbunden mit seinem Metzias, since it's a holiness connected to who he is a Mugbal. So there is a certain Hagbol, a certain limitation to it. No, so, but that's not Gerolenu. Because the Iskashas was kumt in ganzem Tzadabecher. Gerolenu, as we said before, it's just Pchire. Pchire is nothing to do with what you are. Not of what you did and not even what you are. It comes completely because of the chooser, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter Shalmayim Komdida Bagbal, he's beyond all limitations. So here the Rebbe shows how the greatness of the Mile of Gerolenu is over Chalkeinu, even in the higher darga. Chalkeinu in the lower level is that you did something, that's why you get it. Gerolenu is from the Eibishter, it's much higher. But even if Chalkeinu is because who you are, but it's still you, because of you. Gerolenu, the Bchire, is something higher that is because of the Eibishter only, nothing to do with what you are. Like this, the Rebbe explained, there's in a posik, it's repeats something which seems to be saying the same. The posik says, Ki am kodesh atal Hashem alekecha, you are a holy nation to Hashem your God. And in you Hashem chose. The Rasha is mafarish, and Rasha explains. Ki am, what are the two expressions? Same thing. You are a holy nation to Hashem. Hashem chose you. So Rasha says, am kodesh atal kedushas atzim chumam v'secha. That means you are holy on your own because you inherited from your father, from your ancestors. And the second thing Rashi the posik means Hashem, and Hashem chose you. So the Rebbe teaches it means like this: Am kodesh ata, when he says you are holy, is the kedusha mitzadem v'zbonim atam Hashem lekechem, is the holiness that you didn't have because you're children to Hashem. But dosh is kedusha satzbach. That's what Rashi means when he says your own kedusha. The kedusha mitzad because of what you are. Then there's a higher thing. The Rashi says pshat and posik and. Hashem chose you. As in Eden is from Bchiras Atzmas, there you have the Eibishter choosing, nothing to do with you. So the bottom line is what we're trying to bring out so far is Gerol, which is Bchira, is higher than Chalkeinu. And Chalkeinu itself, there are 2 points. Chalkeinu means because of what you did in Aveda. Chalkeinu also has the union of who you are, but it's still because of you. And Gerol, which is Bchira of the Eibishter, is because the Eibishter on his own, nothing to do with your milas. Aber afal became, but teich matone was kumt in seiner Nesen. Now we said before that Gedel and matone are similar. Matone has a little bit more. Gedel is a little bit more, but generally they're the same. So the Rebbe said, but still, even matone, which comes as we said before, which is the union of Gedel, which we said before is completely from the giving end, from the Eibishter's end, still farbun mit the makabel. It's still not the highest level. It's not because of the receiver, but it's still connected to a receiver. What matone is in Yonah, what does a present mean? What the Nesen gita weg is zweiten. Matone means you're giving something because you decided, nothing to do with what he did. He's not deserving it, he didn't work for it, whatever. But you're giving it to somebody else. Then makabel matone, you're giving it to a receiver of the present. And you are involved in it. You care about somebody else because of what he did to you. So it's not because that this is the reason for it. But it's a naiche. There's something in you, Take, that you enjoy him, but you're giving something to him. That's in the matana. And Kenze ben Gedel, in your Gedel. And Gedel is the same Inyan. Alphabet, the Gedel is not verbunden mit Meilas Adobers and Bakumt. Was Bakumt al Yodi Canal. Gedel is, as we said before, nothing to do with what you're getting. Because there's nothing, no Mila in what the thing that you're getting. Because if that would have a Mila, you wouldn't make a Gedel. So it means it's completely because of you. Doch still, it does Aninya for Nakno Hashpo. It's Hashpo, it's giving. Gedel means will Bakumen eine von Kamasachen. You want to get, you have a few things, you want to get one of them. You don't know which one. So it's not something that because of what you did, you're going to get whatever you're going to get. But still something that you want to get. So tails it without zweten. You want to divide something with somebody else, you don't know which one you'll get, which one he'll get. So you're still involved in giving something, in getting something, in change. So there's involved, you're involved in that. There's something that you want of that. And which one to get, you make the gedel. So as much as we're saying it comes completely from the giver, not the receiver, nevertheless, the receiver is tefes mokim, is a metzias. You want to give the receiver. So then we have a third thing, which is inheritance. What is that? Because gidri is not an the concept of Yerusha is not giving bechalt. There's no other person. Nor was the Yerish is that the one that's inherits, the heir, is in place of the one that gives him, that makes him inherit. It's not that it went from one to another. The question is, how did it go? So you could have by selling, you can have by present, you can have by giving over inheritance. Not so. Inheritance is a different concept at all. It's the one that inherits. The heir is in the place of the one he inherits from. An heir is not somebody who's a separate entity who gets whatever it is from the meirish, from the one that's giving him the Yerusha. Nor beloshna kosav, the posuk says, Tachasa v'secha yubanecha. Your children will be instead of you in your place. The Yerush is aimed b'mokem ha'meirish. It is the rest of ha'meirish. The one that Yarshins, but it inherits, is in the place. He becomes that meirish. But the Chamelot, the Bailot of Nichsa meirish. And automatically, since he is in place of the other one, so just like the other one owned it, now he owns it because he becomes the other one. So it's no other person involved. It's only the meirish, and the meirish continues in the Yiddish. And the Rabbi in Leib brings out 57 in many places talks about this, that Yerusha is a complete separate thing. Kumtuis comes out here, the Maila for Yerusha, if Mecher Matona is that the specialty of inheritance over a sale and over a present is like this. Mecher, selling, or Matona and Gedel, these two, is an Anya from the Sin of Ashpor. Whichever way we explained before, that one is higher and the other one comes, the Gedel and the Matona comes from the giver, not from the receiver. So in our case, it comes from the Eibush directly. But the Eibush is giving to somebody. It's not when the person sells something, even when the person gives a present, even though it comes from him, he makes a Gedel. So it's because he chose or he did it. But nevertheless, the pshat is, it's already he, as he relates to somebody else. The chiluk of Yizay is not in the sibah from the Rashba. The difference is only what's the reason why you're giving. By mecher the lekeach zaynet meya mecher the sibah hashpa. By sale, what is the reason, the cause that makes the hashpa? That's the money that he gives. By matone says the rotznan. By matone, what's the reason why he's giving it to somebody? Because the giver wants it. But what does the giver want? There's somebody else, and he wants to give it to somebody else. Schenken by Yerusha is not hashpot, so was is chutz. But by inheritance, it's not that you're giving to somebody who's outside of you, outside of the meirish. Das was the Yerish bekommt in the chosim is weil is emid b'mokem ha-meirish. The reason he gets it, because he is the meirish. He is in the place. There is no other entity. He is the entity of the meirish. And in order 58, in Nigla, the Rebbe says that could be the reason. Pshat in what the Rashba says, that when Yorshim, when heirs inherit, they inherit at the moment when the person dies, not after. Usually we think after the person dies, then starts the inheritance. He says, no, it's at the end, while he's still, like at the end, while he's dying. Why it fits to this? Because it's in a continuation. So if he died already, he's over. So before, as he's dying, he gives it over to the second one. So there's no other entity. It's him continuing. Now we'll understand what is the Maila when we say that the inheritance is beautiful, and that's greater than when we say that We are Chalkeinu of the Eibishter, and we are Gerolenu of the gate of the Eibishter. We understand why. Chalkeinu is a Verbund von Niden mit Elokus, für der Eibishter sich gewiochen mit Samson gewinnen, in der Aveda Meilas von Niden soll bei ihm Tefes Mocken sein. When we say Chalkeinu, Gerolenu, that's connected to the Eibishter, with the Eibishter already was mit Samson himself in such a way that what the Yidden do, or the Metzias of the Yidden, are something important to him. So there is an entity outside, and they're important, and he wants to give them. Now, there are two ways. He wants to give them because of what they deserve, or he wants to give them because he wants to give. But he wants to give to them. Nochmer, legabe dem Eibishter allein, legabe dem Eibishter himself, it says, Gambein v'achenle. By the Eibishter, there's a posik that says in Keheles, he doesn't have a son, he doesn't have a brother. What does that mean? There's no such thing as a son by him, meaning another entity. A son is nevertheless another entity. It's your son. And he connected you because he's your son, but he's still a son. But the Eibishter himself, it doesn't apply. Und das, was Yidden werden angerufen mit Shambonim, the Yidden are called children of the Eibishter, is nor wie der Eibishter sich mit Samson gejochen Teir von ab. Und der Eibishter puts himself, and is mit Samson himself, to a matzav that he makes himself to be a father, but made legabe that madrege is the Av. But legabe the Eibishter himself is that there's no other entity. Geirolenu. So he says like this. Chalkeinu means that the Eibishter makes himself that you are a somebody who's a Metzias who deserves to get. Geirolenu bochar bonu is a kesher for nit mit Neibish mit dem Madregen in the Kus and by Yidden was Metzias mit Zalatzme is Nitepes Mokim. The kesher nem tzad pichros achov sheish lakadosh baruch hu. The first one Chalkeinu is where the Eibishter already puts himself on a matzah that he's your father and he considers you. That Mela, whatever you do has a mitzias and means something. Gerolenu is higher. Gerolenu is the bchira, the free choice, which means that's the connection of the Yidden to the Eibishter from a level where the Eibishter did not even lower himself to a mitzias where something else, there's a mitzias. In other words, there's, what is Bocham? It comes only from the Eibishter. It's not because of what the Yidden did. So it comes from the Eibishter, the Eibishter is beyond anything the Lashon, the Sikha here is. And Metzias Mitzadatzme is Nitefes Mokim. That the other entity doesn't mean anything. The connection is only because he chose. But like we said before, still, nevertheless, even though it's something that's in a matzah which is higher than any other Metzias, but nevertheless, he wants to connect himself to a Metzias. Kiviyochel, to something that's not him. When together from Kleibim is b'shaychat, but we use the word choosing. Choosing is always something outside of you. That's what choosing means. Why did you choose it? Not because of what the thing that you're choosing is special, has the miler. It's because of you decide. This comes from your side. True. But nevertheless, there is this concept that there is another Metzias. We have to go into explanation. I'm not going to go into explain the difference between the two things we said before. Before the Eibishter Metzamtzim himself, that he becomes an Av and the Metzias of Yidden become a Metzias. And here he says the second, the higher Madrege Bchira is there's nothing that's Teipes Mokim, and nevertheless he lowered himself. So what's the difference in the Tzimtzum and the Metzamtzim? But there are these two levels based on what we said before. But the inheritance is in Yonah was Yidden seinen Keviyochel Einsach mit Atzmusi Yisborach. This is the connection of Yidden to the Eibishter, not as Yidden are connected to the Eibishter. They're not connected. Yidden and the Eibishter are one. Yisrael b'kutchebricha kulachad Yidden and the Eibishter are one. Like we said before, by Yerusha is something that the Yerush, the heir, is one. He is the Meirish. Der Verbund von Yidden mit an Eibishter is in Atzmusi Yisborach. We're connected to the essence of the Eibishter. Was is Hecher von welches is nur shel Tzimtzum. There's no Tzimtzum here. The other ones is, there's two levels. There's a Tzimtzum, a real Tzimtzum, which Mele Yidden are Tevis Mokim, there are Vedas Tevis Mokim, there are Metzias Tevis Mokim. Then there's a higher level of Geiril, which is not the same level of Tzimtzum, but some kind of Tzimtzum we're already trying to give something to somebody. This is beyond. The Farbert, the Songur of Mishem Yerusha, that's why it's called inheritance. Valdos is the Geder for Yerusha. This is the concept of Yerusha of inheritance. But the Yerush is Eimed Mokim HaMeirish, the Farva said is the Etzem HaMeirish. Why? He's in place of the one that's giving him, one that's making him inherit. Why? Because this is connected to the Meirish himself. It's not because the Meirish already connects himself to somebody else. He, the Yerush, the one that inherits it, the din of Yerusha, that this is part of, it continues, as if saying the Meirish continues. That's what Yidden are. These three things in the connection of Yidden to Hashem. Chalkeinu, Gerolena, V'Yerushaseinu, Zayin Farambun, B'cholos, with the dry clothes, Kufis Nam Yisrael. Generally, it's connected to three stages, three times by Yidden. Number one, Kedem Matan Torah, before Matan Torah, before the Torah was given. Second stage is Noch Matan Torah, after the Torah was given. There's Man from Avedis Yisrael, B'Kima Torah Mitzvah. After the Torah was given, and now we are obligated to keep Torah Mitzvahs. And then the third level is L'Osed Lavi. In the future, when Mashiach will come, there's Man Agmul, Bisum Tachas Shleim Hashem, at the time when we will get our reward. And to the highest level of reward, that's the third stage. And these three are parallel, the three times are parallel to these three levels. And the Rebbe explains it. Yeshleim Rabbi, and then the explanations like this. Eich far Matan Torah is nicht angerufen geworden Bonim. Even before Matan Torah, the Yidden were called children to Hashem. He steht by Yitzias Mitzrayim, Bnei B'cheir Yisrael. When Yidden were on Mitzrayim, David said, Tel Pare Bnei B'cheir Yisrael, my firstborn son is in Bayut, let him go. So the Eibishter calls him children. Eich far Matan Torah is Kishana Begilu de Meile von Yidden Gabal U'Mesela, because before Matan Torah, there was also very simple, very revealed, open, the specialty of Yidden over other nations. But those are gebracht to Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's what brought Yidden to take on Mitzrayim. But this is all given a mile in Zeh and Mitzias and Aveda. What was the mile? The mile is who they are, and also what they did in their Aveda. So it comes because of the Yidden of their Mitzias. By Matan Torah in this Gal geworden der Rinja from the Bonne Bachartem Kolam Veloshim. The Matan Torah, what was revealed, the Eibusher chose the Yidden from all nations. Bchiras HaKadosh Baruch in Am Yisrael Kanal. The Eibusher chose the Yidden. Und der Pfarrer hat das so gedrückt in the Sinnes der Torah bei Mitzvahs Yidden. And how did it express itself? The Eibusher gave the Yidden Torah Mitzvahs. What does that mean? Und in dem ist bestanden der Rufte von Torah Mitzvahs, nicht im Matan Torah, aber der Aveda von Yidden obes vor Matan Torah. That was something, the specialty, the greater level of the Yidden after Matan Torah compared to the Yidden before Matan Torah. Like the Ovis. What was it? Lift Matan Torah, the Aveda von Yidden gewinnt, gemosten le Kirch anivri. Before Matan Torah, they did great things. But it was limited to the limitations of the creature. They're all creatures, and they did it on their own. The Eibusher didn't tell them to do mitzvah, so they did it on their own. So they reached a level as much as a human being, great human being, could reach. The greatest human being, but it's still limited. Matan Torah is no salon nice to us. Matan Torah, the Eibusher gave us a Torah. Is the Torah mitzvah in the Torah mitzvah verante kechan veda. So in the Torah you have the Eibusher. So the Torah the Eibusher gave us comes from him. So these are the two levels. First level is the receiver. In this case, is the Yidden on their own did whatever they were able to do. It was limited. But Matan Torah already came from the Eibusher. The Eibusher gave us the Torah, which is connected to the Eibusher choosing Yidden. He gave us the Torah. So it's him. So it's the higher level. It's like the Bechira. It's like the Gedel. La'achar gmar kiyum Torah mitzvahs, but the Yidden is galon werden zeir atzmazik emeile. Vayofi Yerushaseinu. After we finish with everything, the Mashiach will come. Then there will be revealed by Yidden the essential Meile, Mayofa Yerushaseinu, the concept of Yerusha, the Rinya Funachle, the concept of inheritance, as Yidden seine Chatke v'yochem atatzmusi yisborah, that the Yidden are one with the Eibusher, that we're not even an entity for itself, it's only the Eibusher. And that's Mayofa Yerushaseinu. And the question we asked in the beginning, why is Yerusha the highest? Because that represents the highest level of a Yid's connection to the Eibusher. That's why in Eretz Yisrael also, the highest level of Eretz Yisrael was that it's a Yerusha, because Eretz Yisrael came because of the Yidden. So in Mela, we find it by Eretz Yisrael, we find it by the Yidden. And them seeing the Mishnah. This explains why the end of Mishnayos, of all 6 Dorim of Mishnayos, is Osid HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Hanchil. The Eibusher is going to make all tzaddikim inherit 310 worlds, because the Posek says, L'Hanchil Eyabe Yesh. He's going to give an inheritance to those that love him, Yesh. So Yesh is Shin Yud, which is 310, but Yesh also has a meaning on its own. What does Yesh mean? The Rambam is mavayra. The Loshen Yesh v'aisat mitzias at midash hashem l'tachlis. The word Yesh means it exists. It is. It means something, a mitzias, an existence, which is constant, has no limitations. But this is existence. This is the essence of existence. This is what Chassidus calls the etzem of the Eibusher. The Yesh Ho'amiti, or we call him the Yesh Ho'amiti, the real Yesh. And the real Yesh means it's an essential existence, which is the concept of existence. What does it mean? He will give to the Eyavim, to the Tzadikim. He'll make him inherit the Yesh. The Yid becomes one with the Yesh Amiti, with the Etzem of Davish, which is the higher level. That's why the lotion is to give inherit. Well, the Sardas von Yidden with Yesh Amiti, Yesh Amuchel, because the union between Yidden and the Yesh Amiti, or sometimes we call him Yesh HaMuchlet, the absolute Yesh, which is the Etzem of Davish, which has no limitation, that is Mitzadinyan Anachla. That it comes as concept of inheritance. But inheritance means you are one, the Meirish, the one that makes you inherit. Yidden are inheriting from the Eibishter because we are one with the Eibishter. But the Miet wird man verstehen, for was the Rambam bringt them by the mitzvah von Nachlas, Dafke den Werter, Ish Kiyomas Ben Enel. Now we'll answer why when it comes to the mitzvah of Nachla, we asked in the beginning, why does the Rambam bring the posik if a person will die and he has no son? And that's all. He doesn't bring the rest. Where we see the concept of Nachla in these words. These words don't express the union of inheritance. While the Teicha Ruchne from Nachla git sich arois in the minyan from Ben Enel. Because if you think about the deeper union in inheritance, we see that in the words Ubein Einlei. As we said before, the Meilitz von Chalkeinu Geirolenu are verbunden mit dem Adrege with the Reibisch, der sich mesamtze mit dem Adrege von Av. When we talk about the Meil of Yidden, Chalkeinu Geirolenu, they're connected to that level where the Reibisch der sich mesamtze himself to a level where he makes himself as a father. Was geht an Ort of a zweiter Metzias, a Ben, das wird Metzias, which gives a place that if you make yourself as already a father has a child. So you already, Mitzamt Eibish is Mitzamtzim himself in a lower level that he makes a place, there should be another Mitzias, should be a bed, and the Taka becomes a bed. That's a Chalkeinu. Even when we come to the level of Geirolenu, those as the Eibish is Beicheriden, even when the Eibish chooses Yidden, so he chooses. So it's not the same type of Tzimtzum, it's a much higher Madrege, beyond the Mitzias of, but nevertheless, he wants to give it to the Yidden. He chooses the Eden. So there is another Metzias. And I said before, it's a very, we call it dakisdik, a very thin line in between the two levels. Not going to go into, but there are these two levels. So that's these two. Mashenk negeder from Yerushaseinu. The concept of that we are inherit from the Eibishter is verbunden mit Atzmusse shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's connected to the Eibishter himself was Dorten sagt man, Bein Ein. It's a level where there is no concept of Bein. Is hecher from welches is in he's beyond anything beyond that's outside of him, even in the form that he's the chooser and what counts is only him. But still, you're giving a bain means there is another mitzvah. You want that, you choose to give him, but there is a him. When dort is an Yidden mushrish, that's where Yidden are enrooted because Yisrael v'kutchebricha kulachad Yidden and Eibishter one. So now we understand why the last mitzvah is Nachla, because Nachla expresses the true connection of Yidden to the Eibishter, which is the point of everything that we do. And we understand why he quotes the pasuk Bein Einlei, because this represents a level where the connection of Yidden to the Eibishter with no other entity being there, because the Yidden are the entity of the Eibishter. Now, this is a very deep sikha. It has a lot of depth to it, and a lot of, and Chassidus talks about it, you got to learn a lot of Chassidus, look through the Marmakemis and learn and think about it a lot. But there's a lot of depth here that we have to look into, and everyone has to continue looking into this, and then they'll get to understand it better.